XR and eye tracking are two technologies that have proven their use in a number of different fields over the last couple of decades. Welcome to this session about democratizing health solutions with these two technologies. I am Johan Bouvin, Director of Product for Ecosystem Software and Partnerships at Tobii, and with me today I have Scott Anderson, Chief Clinical Officer at SyncThink. SyncThink is one of the more interesting players in the healthcare field in XR these days, I think. And Scott will tell you more about their journey from their early prototypes and research to their full-blown commercial solution they just launched on Pico Neo 2i. Over to you, Scott.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks, Johan, for that great introduction. I'm really excited to be here. And as Johan mentioned, my name is Scott Anderson. I'm the Chief Clinical Officer at SyncThink. And today we're going to be talking about, specifically, I'm going to be talking about our technology, iSync, and how we're leveraging XR and eye tracking based solutions for healthcare. And specifically, I'm going to be talking about neurological care. And we really are in a unique position today where we're seeing critical advances in the development of XR systems, hardware with integrated eye tracking that's really facilitating and allowing us to bring our analytical and software-based solutions to a broader population of the market and making it more accessible for a larger population. And so the title of this topic is reflective of the discussion that I'm going to be having with you today. As I mentioned, our product is iSync, and it's an extended reality-based technology used for neurological use cases. It's a digital health platform really that helps us and equips clinicians and patients with objective, rapid information that allows them to manage the spectrum of brain health and performance across the lifespan. And we obviously work with unique partners like Tobii, like Pico, to bring the latest advances in wireless hardware technology to the healthcare environment to make a seamless patient experience and also to really facilitate a centralized place where clinicians can collect, manage, aggregate, and gather insights for neurological health information. And really, it hasn't been done up until this point. And so we're really the first ones in this space that are really delivering a full solution that integrates seamlessly with the clinician's workflow and allows them to not only assess the patient, but to manage them through the entire course of care and even through the process of treatment. We've been at this for a really long time and have worked extensively in the past with various types of head-mounted displays. Back over a decade ago, when we first got started in this area, we were focused on developing our own head-mounted displays prior to the emergence of device headsets and fully integrated devices like the Pico Neo 2i that we're using today. And a lot of this started in the work that we were doing with the Department of Defense, really looking to identify cognitive changes in soldiers as a result of exposure to blasts and heavy artillery rounds that occurred in basic training and in warfare. And so our first prototypes were used in the Afghan wars, and this led to extensive studies and funding from the Department of Defense that allowed us to modernize our solution at the pace of technology and to refine our algorithms and ultimately to gain an FDA approval a few years ago. And so while we've only been commercial for 3 or 4 years now, we've had an extensive history of R&D and have really been working to assess and identify ways that we could build an integrated eye tracking based neurological health solution for the masses. And really our solution breaks down like this. There's 3 components to this solution. We have a hardware-based system that facilitates the implementation of our software and analytics tools that is FDA approved. And essentially, we utilize the Pico Neo 2i with the embedded eye tracking sensors and connect it via Bluetooth to an administrative tablet that the clinician monitors. And so the clinician aggregates all the patient information there. They can select the type of assessments that they want to perform. We have assessments that are neurologically based that are not necessarily specific to eye tracking as well. And so it's the entire encompassing workflow of the neurological clinician. We have this really robust cloud-based infrastructure that allows us to look at a ton of different types of patient variables and other types of conditions, neurological conditions, and then to extract that information to create unique models that provide additional insights into clinical conditions, performance related conditions, and helps us derive more information about what the predisposition or the patient's disposition may look like in certain situations. And then finally, we have this platform that is not just diagnostic in nature, but enables patients to interact with the system so that they can perform their own remediation strategies once the diagnosis has been made. And so we, offer therapeutic tools that really resonate with people with neurological conditions that allow them to remediate or improve their visual and vestibular strategies that all can be done in the headset. And so it's this combination of a robust platform that has multiple different types of patient interactions, a robust data infrastructure that guides clinical decision-making and supports the diagnostic and therapeutic progressions, and accessibility and making it accessible to a broader population so that they can do something about it after they've had a diagnosis. And really, this speaks to the unmet need that occurs in neurological care today. Really, the problem with many neurological conditions, and the ones I'm going to be speaking about today, but in general, are neurodevelopmental conditions that are chronic in nature, such as autism and ADHD, acute neurological conditions such as concussion and vestibular disorders, and neurodegenerative diseases such as Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia, and the like. So, the thing that all of these have in common is that it's diagnosis by exclusion. And really, there are no standardized diagnostic procedures or criteria in place for each of these conditions today. And so ultimately, it's trial and error. And ultimately, the result of that is an extreme burden on the healthcare system. In the US alone, we see that the lifetime cost of neurological care is over $1 billion. And ultimately, we've really failed to provide adequate therapeutic interventions, as 99% of CNS drug trials have failed to produce medications that allow patients to manage their conditions properly. And so we know that we need better and more accurate diagnostic tools, and that the standard of care today is very, very problematic to understanding people's conditions more specifically. And then finally, once they've been diagnosed, nobody has access to really credible and scientifically validated therapeutic tools that can optimize brain function or train brain performance, as I like to call it. We're reliant on apps on our phone or video games in order to do that today. And really, there's not a lot of support for that in the scientific community. And so we believe that there is this opportunity here to meet and improve the quality of care that's provided by bringing objective, mobile, rapid diagnostics, and also therapeutic interventions that are tailored to the diagnostics. So how does this work? So how do we utilize eye tracking to identify differences in people's brain states or their cognitive function or their neurological conditions that they may be presenting with? And it all starts with orientation and this process of how the brain moves the eyes for you to become oriented to your external environment. And so we have to constantly be moving our eyes to know where we are in time and space, and to select and interact with content that we find stimulating or that we actually want to interact with. And so there's this specific process of how the brain moves the eyes, lands it on something that is particularly of interest or that we want to interpret. And then we utilize the neural networks between the cerebellum, prefrontal cortex, and the parietal lobe to help understand what that is. And we do that as the image that our eyes are resting on land on the image rests on the fovea of the retina, and our brain can then take this neural network pathway to identify what it actually is. And so this is referred to as the attention networks. And ultimately, the different movements that we see in eye movements that are directed by the brain tell us in real time how the brain is functioning. And so when we see abnormal eye movements such as disconjugate gaze or nystagmus present in eye movements, it can be reflective of disease or pathology. And so our system utilizes eye tracking sensors to quickly and rapidly quantify these eye movements and select them and then correlate them with different conditions such as I've referenced previously. And so really specifically, how does this work? I'll give you an example of one test that we use today. We use what's called a smooth pursuit task, which is we present a target on the screen in the goggles and it goes around in a circle like this. And we ask the patient to keep their eyes on the target as it moves around the screen. And when we see normal function, a normal person should be able to keep their eye on the target and follow it wherever it goes around the screen with very little movement of the eyes away from the target. However, when we see different types of eye movements that are reflective of saccadic jerking or nystagmus, we know that these are abnormal eye movements, and then we can categorize them based on different conditions. And so I'm going to play a little video here too as well, but I also want to point out that we have these different examples that I've referenced before, concussions where they have this big forward jerking in front of the target's location. They jerk off of the target because they can't keep up with it. In cases of fatigue or sleep deprivation, we see people who have more up and down jitter in their eyes, and subsequently their eyes move up and down in reference to the target. And then in cases in ADHD, we see like a windshield wiper effect of people's eyes slowing up and falling behind the target, slowing up or speeding up and falling behind the target. So it looks like a windshield wiper. And these are very distinct, unique biomarkers that are reflective of neurological conditions. And I'm going to just play a video here that shows the left and the right eye following the target around the screen. And when we see abnormalities, there's things like this jerking that happens in front of the target that tell us that something's wrong with the patient, because they should be able to easily keep their eyes on a slow moving target like this. So where are these applications used today? I mentioned healthcare, that's what we're talking about today for both clinical and therapeutic use cases. But again, also in sports, concussion is highly prevalent in sports today, especially contact sports. And so it's currently being used to support the diagnosis of concussion there. Also, sports teams are using this as a proactive monitoring tool to see cognitive changes as a result of sleep deprivation. You know, the athletes are traveling to different time zones and are competing multiple times a week, and the degradation of cognitive performance is what teams are after and really interested in looking at that and correlating that to injury rates. And then finally, the military, where we got our original start, working with the Department of Defense, obviously looking for cognitive changes related to traumatic brain injury, monitoring the effects of risk as it's associated with fatigue. Is it safe for a soldier to be deployed or to perform a certain type of mission, or should we send somebody else, or should we remediate the soldier and then send them back out at another time when we can know objectively that their brain performance is optimized? So these are the primary use cases that are utilized today. Specifically speaking about healthcare, I'll point out a specific use case that's very common. We work with a lot of integrated healthcare systems that have a multidisciplinary approach to care for patients. And so Mass General Hospital is a perfect example of this, where they not only have a concussion diagnostic center, but they provide therapeutic rehabilitation services. They have primary care services for the general population. They participate in clinical research and training of physicians, and they also have outreach programs. They have relationships with all of the professional sports teams and a lot of the college teams in the Massachusetts area. And so this is a really great, robust example of all the different places where our technology could be housed and utilized today. And ultimately, what they do is that they have a rapid screening process that the physician or the clinician performs, and then they know where to send the clinician to, or the patient, for the appropriate type of care that they need. And so ultimately they have done this, and then we have supported the process of helping them understand the value proposition of our technology by allowing them to bill for these services and to get reimbursement. And so ultimately, that's what the healthcare systems want. Is first thing they're going to ask you is, how do I make my money back with this technology? And you have to have a specific ROI equation that's attractive to them, for them to understand on a per patient basis or on an annual basis how much money they're going to generate from billing for this type of service. And based on the patient volume that they have, they'll be able to understand more specifically what that looks like in terms of dollars, so they can make this type of investment in this technology. And that's ultimately what a lot of the healthcare system needs today. We also work with professional sports teams, as I mentioned. We utilize this as a proactive monitoring tool. The Atlanta Hawks are one of the teams that are pioneering this, and they are proactively screening these players to look for degradation and changes that occur from being in different time zones or being awake at odd hours of the day or the night, and then adjusting their training volume accordingly. So another example, not necessarily healthcare related, but how teams are using our technology. And then specifically related to our data ecosystem and our capabilities, as I mentioned, we have this customizable interface for clinicians to design based on their workflow. And so we're not only providing them with eye tracking assessments that can be done in the goggles, but we're also capturing all of the relevant patient information that's specific to that type of clinician. And so whether it's a neurorehabilitation specialist or a physician who's making the diagnosis, we can capture the patient's demographic information, their prior history of injury, the types of medications they're on. We can also integrate and digitize forms and questionnaires that are standardized or standard of care for certain type of diagnostic interventions, such as ADHD. So we have, the CARS inventories or the CBRS inventories that are commonly utilized to diagnose ADHD today. But we're combining all of that with our infrastructure that's based around eye tracking. And then we can take this data and export it as it were a standing head health record or a head health EMR system to their native EMR, where all this data can live in the patient's record. And then ultimately what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to take all of this data and aggregate it and then provide some unique insights through the trained models that we utilize to advise clinicians about the status of the patient relative to similar courses of care that they've experienced or that live in our database. And so it's a very robust infrastructure that allows the clinician to extract a lot of value, and ultimately the result of that is better patient outcomes. And then this is just an example of some of the things that live on our system. We have 7 eye tracking assessments. We have 16 neurocognitive assessments, 10 different types of patient inventories and questionnaires, and multiple training paradigms for rehabilitation. And then ultimately we collect tremendous amounts of data from this. And then this is how we can utilize our machine learning techniques to advise the clinician more specifically about the disposition of the patient and the care that they need. So what is the value of a technology like this? Working with partners like Pico and Tobii to bring a solution like this to the market. Ultimately, we're making it more accessible, right? We're able to bring a mobile, wireless, state-of-the-art technology that can reach a broader population. And in doing that, we can make it more affordable, and we can therefore incentivize the clinician with reimbursement strategies, and ultimately reduce the lifetime cost of care for neurological use cases. And so that's also a very strong, I think, discussion point around healthcare value. We ultimately are improving outcomes because we're, for the first time, bringing objective, reliable information to clinicians to support the decision-making process, which allows them to make a decision faster and ultimately to bring the solution to a more specific outcome by giving them targeted intervention for therapy, right? So if you know quicker what the problem is with the patient, you can get them the appropriate intervention faster. And then finally, we're ultimately saving the clinician time. Most of our clinicians report that the diagnostic procedure is about 50% reduced by using our system, which allows them to see more patients and to do more with the extra time that they have. Now, speaking specifically about our relationship with Pico, this is a great example of the benefits of working with partners like Pico and Tobii, for that matter, is that we have traditionally had to build our own customizable hardware pieces and assemble them together, which really has prevented us in the short term that we've been commercial from really getting to a place where we can scale our technology and actually meet the need that's out there for now. For the last couple of years, we haven't been able to meet the demand because the cost of our eye tracking solution was customized, and therefore our price point was so high that we couldn't actually get to a larger part of the market. And now with a solution like the Pico Neo 2i, we're able to reduce those costs, and we're able to make a more affordable solution for the majority of the healthcare environment, and really also in the down market opportunities that exist in the military and even in high school sports. People can afford this type of solution now, so we can make this ubiquitous, we can democratize it for all, and we can make it available to anybody that wants it. And then more specifically, working with Tobii's software system, the Acumen software that is integrated into the eye tracking specs, the specific things that it offers us that's really of value is the in-app calibration process. So when we run our SyncThink app inside the Pico Neo 2i, we have to calibrate everyone's eyes so that we can know where their eye position is, so the cameras know what to record. And we have this very brief 10-second in-app calibration process that confirms this process for us and allows us to maintain the short period of time that we use to assess patients. We pride ourselves in being able to deliver this in 60 seconds, and having a 10-second calibration process really allows us to keep that time down. So that's a great feature. We ultimately also provide real-time images and recordings of the eye movements that occur from the tablet. And so when the patient is inside the headset, we can see what their eyes are doing, we can record what their eyes are doing, and we can play them back to the patient so they can see what they're doing. And then finally, with respect to the filtering of raw data that we capture through the sensors that perform the eye tracking, we can do a lot of reduction of noise that we call that we capture from the raw data. And so this is an example of that circular trajectory that we talked about earlier in Smooth Pursuit, and the raw data that we capture, and then being able to make it a smoother, more presentable visual plot that we can then improve or implement into our reports, so that clinicians have a better sense of what it is that they're looking at. And so all of this is made possible by the software that Tobii provides, and really saves us a tremendous amount of time and effort, because we would have to do this ourselves otherwise. And then finally, just thinking about the future of neurotechnology, before I turn it back over to Johan, I really want to just take a minute to reference these key areas that I think are emerging with respect to neurotechnology and healthcare in general. Is that we're really seeing a modernization of the healthcare industry being enabled by point of care solutions that can provide more robust information in a shorter period of time, and allow the clinician to make better decisions. And so ultimately, we're talking about any advances in technology that has to be governed by this idea that we are going to be getting better patient outcomes as a result. The healthcare delivery system is in need of tremendous modernization, and so the integration or the opportunity for XR technologies to integrate into other technologies such as EMR systems and biometric sensors and others is a tremendous opportunity that many are taking advantage of today. And I also think too that consumer brain health is really at its highest point at this point in time. The awareness is at an all-time high. We're taking tremendous proactive measures to preserve and maintain our brain's health through exercise, dietary modifications, behavioral modifications, etc. And so this is helping facilitate us being in control of our own well-being, and ultimately deciding what's best for us, as opposed to putting the doctor in a position that historically has been the case, where they're deciding what happens to the patient. And then finally, the regulatory strategy. We know the regulatory strategy is in need of disruption. And so there are certain things like getting software as a medical device, and having new reimbursement pathways for special conditions that represent unmet needs. These are all things that are designed to help improve easier, more affordable access and democratization of new technologies that have value and that meet unmet needs. And so tremendous opportunity. And I want to just say, I think that this reflects the strategy of our company SyncThink, but also there are organizations like Tobii, and I'm going to turn it over to Johan now. Tobii has really been at the forefront of this. Not only, I'm just speaking about neurological care, but Tobii has been a player and has been developing eye tracking solutions for over 2 decades, has been a player in the healthcare industry for a significant amount of time, and has been innovating in that specific place, and also has tremendous I think, solutions to offer outside of even healthcare. And so I want to turn it back over to Johan, because I know he wants to talk more specifically about the broader healthcare landscape and how their solutions are really driving innovation for the masses. And so at this time, I'll turn it back over to Johan, and I'll be in the chat window, happy to answer any questions you guys may have. And if not, we'll talk after. Great. Thanks so much for listening, and take it away, Johan.
I'll be happy to do that, Scott. And thank you so much for a great presentation. I have heard a lot of presentations for you and know SyncThink since a long time, but I realize that every time I hear you talk about what you do, I learn something new. I was particularly struck by the graph of how price has developed over the last 10 years almost for you, and how the market really is ready for adoption of much broader healthcare solutions with those kind of price points. So super exciting to see how this continues. And I'm going to come back to that actually in a little bit here, how we from Tobii see technologies converging here at this point. But first, I wanted to give an overview of eye tracking as a technology for those in the audience who haven't seen that before. So in XR, eye tracking is really a foundational technology. It's something that is being integrated natively into more and more devices. and is needed to make the whole optimization of a good VR device and AR device in the future possible. And technically, there are a couple of components to an eye tracking system. There are a bunch of illuminators and image sensors and algorithms running on some sort of chip in or outside of the headset. And this basically outputs a real-time stream of where the user is looking in the headset and in the 3D environment. And this opens up for a number of different values in XR. First of all, it makes for better devices. Headsets become natively more optimized for what they need to do and can household system resources better when they know where the user is looking. As an example, graphical resources can be focused on the particular point where the user is paying attention, even though that's moving around the field of vision the whole time. And that way, just make better use of the GPU time. For developers who make interactive applications, eye tracking can provide very, very big possibilities in terms of man-machine interaction. Combining eye tracking with controllers, for example, is somewhat magical. You can look and grab anything that you look at with a press of a trigger rather than having to point a laser pointer everywhere. And finally, and probably most important here today when we talk about healthcare in XR, is the actionable insights that eye tracking gives. The kind of biomarkers and insights into the human condition and human behavior that these kind of technologies can provide. And this is an area where we have a lot of history with Tobii. We have some 2,500 academic research customers who do research in cognitive psychology, neuroscience, reading studies, and also more industrial applications, such as market research or packaging design and things like that. And these are customers we know very well from our work with our own solutions over the years. And over the time, we've also seen how a lot of this research is coming out into the industry. And healthcare especially has been very, very fruitful grounds for applications working with eye tracking. Scott obviously is working a lot with neuro diseases and therapy and assessments for those. But we see a lot of other things as well. In vision, there are applications treating amblyopia or lazy eye. In surgery, there are systems using eye tracking to make surgeries more safe. And there are a lot of reading studies that have made it into actual applications as well, with dyslexia treatments, for example. All of these using eye tracking from Tobii. And what we see now with the maturity of XR is that eye tracking is clearly proven in healthcare and in research. And with eye tracking and VR converging and being more and more a standard in the space, there is a platform suddenly that is very affordable compared to what's been there previously. And we saw that in Scott's description of how SyncThink's journey have been. I think this is a super exciting time to be in XR healthcare, quite honestly, because there's so much research that have been done that now has a platform and a way to commercialize. As Tobii in this situation, we see our role to enable innovations and catalyze the democratization of these kind of applications in healthcare. First of all, we provide the hardware for a number of different headsets out in the market, Pico Neo 2 being the latest, one of the latest in the lineup. We do this also on a background of having provided very, very advanced eye tracking systems for research and healthcare applications through the years. So the knowledge from that work ourselves has really allowed us to know what good eye tracking looks like and what it takes to provide something that is viable in these kind of industries. And then last but not least, we provide value-added products and services as well. So we have a very active dev zone where we basically package the knowledge we have from our 2 decades in the industry in design guidelines, in best practices, in a lot of research reference for how eye tracking can be used for analyzing human behaviors or interactions. And we also package that in a comprehensive SDK with samples and developer tools that help developers get up and running faster and accelerate the time to market for companies like this. Specifically, I wanted to say a couple of words about Tobii Ocumen that Scott referenced to as well. This is our advanced eye tracking solution for healthcare. This is a value-added package that supports a number of headsets out there with Tobii eye tracking integrated, Pico, Neo 2, among others. And in this SDK package, we enable more advanced eye tracking capabilities based on our history and experience in the field. We have a data filtering framework for handling this data set. And as Scott said, this is sensory data from eye movements that are inherently noisy. And a lot of advanced applications actually start with exactly the same kind of needs for smoothing and filtering and categorization of eye movements when we fixate on something or when our eyes dart back and forth or follow moving objects. All of those things are very, very standard, and we provide those in Tobii Ocumen. Then we also take that one step further and go into the research literature and provide biomarker detection for things like different sized pupils or rapid eye movements where there should just be steady gaze. These are things that are known biomarkers for a large number of human conditions, and can be useful when healthcare solution providers do their development. We also have our history in validating the quality of the data and making sure that not only is the data of high quality, but you actually know how good it is, so you can rely on it for research or for regulatory processes and so on. And all of this is a package that we have now released last year, and super happy to see some of the first products in the market using it. And with that, I think Scott and I want to wrap up here today. And thank you so much for joining us for this session. And feel free to reach out with any questions you have.